The courtroom fell silent as the judge pronounced the death sentence. Lieutenant Commander Astrid Colvere, once a decorated SEAL sniper, now sat paralyzed in her wheelchair, condemned as a traitor. Some officers smirked, others looked away in shame. No one questioned the evidence against her. But as military police moved to take her away, her service dog Valor suddenly broke protocol. What happened next would shake the foundations of military justice forever. A single act of canine loyalty was about to expose a betrayal no one saw coming. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story of loyalty and justice moved you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service. The JAG courtroom at Norfolk Naval Base fell silent as Lieutenant Commander Astrid Colvere wheeled herself to the defendant's position, her service dog Valor padding faithfully alongside. Despite her paralysis from the waist down, her posture remained military precise, shoulders squared beneath her dress blues. The medals on her chest, including the Silver Star and Purple Heart, caught the harsh fluorescent light as she positioned herself before the bench. Commodore Eloise Ravencroft, the presiding judge, reviewed her notes one final time, her expression giving nothing away. The gallery behind Astrid was packed with naval officers, journalists, and curious onlookers drawn to the most high-profile military trial in decades. The first female SEAL sniper, decorated for valor in 3 combat theaters, now facing charges of treason, had drawn attention far beyond military circles. Captain Daedalus Blackwood, lead prosecutor with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, approached the bench. His uniform was impeccable, each crease seemingly sharp enough to cut. "The evidence is irrefutable, Your Honor," he announced, his voice projecting to ensure everyone present could hear. Lieutenant Commander Colvere sold classified intelligence to enemies of the state, resulting in the ambush that killed 3 of her fellow SEALs. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Perhaps her injury left her bitter. Perhaps financial pressures after her medical discharge clouded her judgment. But the fact remains, she betrayed her country, her oath, and her team. From her position, Astrid felt the stares boring into her back. Some officers couldn't meet her eyes when she turned, while others glared with naked contempt. In the front row sat Rear Admiral Thaddeus Wexler, head of naval intelligence for the Pacific Fleet, his silver hair and stern expression conveying decades of authority. His testimony about discovering the intelligence breach had been particularly damning, delivered with the weight of his 30 years of service behind it. Astrid's JAG appointed defense counsel, Lieutenant Zachariah Quill, had done his best with limited options. Young and earnest, he seemed out of his depth against Blackwood's prosecutorial experience. "My client maintains her innocence," he stated for the record, though his voice lacked conviction. The electronic transfers to offshore accounts, the encrypted messages from her personal devices, the witness testimonies, all painted a compelling narrative of betrayal. Throughout the 3-week trial, Astrid had barely spoken. She offered no explanation, no defense beyond a plea of not guilty. Some interpreted her silence as remorse, others as arrogance. The media had run wild with theories, from PTSD-induced breakdowns to ideological conversion during her rehabilitation. As Ravencroft prepared to announce the verdict, Astrid's mind drifted to fragments of that night in Yemen, the mission that had changed everything. The unexpected enemy presence, the communications failure, the ambush that should never have happened. She remembered questioning the intelligence before the mission, filing reports that somehow disappeared from the system. Lieutenant Javed, Chief Petty Officer Nguyen, and Petty Officer First Class Delgado never made it home, their bodies recovered days later. Lieutenant Commander Astrid Colvere, Ravencroft's voice cut through her thoughts, bringing her sharply back to the present. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. "This court finds you guilty on all charges of treason, conspiracy, and dereliction of duty." Valor shifted at Astrid's feet, sensing her increased heart rate, though her face remained impassive. His ears twitched forward, alert to every sound in the suddenly still courtroom. "Given the severity of these crimes and the resulting loss of American lives," Ravencroft continued, her voice heavy with the weight of her duty, "this court sentences you to death by lethal injection, as prescribed under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for treason committed during wartime operations." The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Death sentences were exceedingly rare in military courts. This was the first such verdict for a decorated officer in decades. Journalists scrambled to capture the moment, cameras flashing despite courtroom regulations against photography. "Order!" Ravencroft commanded, striking her gavel once. The room gradually quieted, the shock giving way to a tense silence. As military police approached to escort her out, Lieutenant Quill leaned over. His face had gone pale, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "I am sorry," he whispered, voice barely audible. "We will appeal, but with the evidence they presented, I do not know if—" "It is all right," Astrid replied, the first word she had spoken all day. Her voice was steady, surprising Quill. Her hand dropped to Valor's head, fingers tangling in his fur. The dog looked up at her with complete trust, a stark contrast to the condemnation surrounding them. From across the courtroom, Admiral Wexler watched with cold satisfaction, exchanging a brief nod with Captain Blackwood. Neither man noticed that Astrid's fingers were tapping a pattern against Valor's harness, a signal trained over countless hours. As the MP stepped forward, Astrid caught the eye of Lieutenant Safina Okafor, a junior JAG officer who had been assisting with case documentation. Unlike the others, Okafor's expression showed confusion rather than judgment. She had noticed something during the evidence presentations, inconsistencies that did not align with the prosecution's narrative, but had kept her observations to herself. "Stand for transfer, Commander," the MP sergeant instructed, his tone professionally neutral. Astrid complied, using her upper body strength to shift from her wheelchair to the standing transport chair they had brought. The process was awkward, designed to highlight her vulnerability. Several officers looked away, uncomfortable with the spectacle of a decorated warrior reduced to this state. As they secured her wrists to the chair, whispers rippled through the gallery. Some expressed satisfaction at justice served, others discomfort at the severity of the sentence. A rear admiral near the back muttered about the shame she had brought to the SEALS, while a young ensign questioned whether the evidence had truly been beyond reasonable doubt. Valor remained perfectly positioned beside Astrid, his training impeccable despite the chaos around them. To most observers, he was simply a service dog assisting a disabled veteran. No one questioned why a convicted traitor would be allowed to keep her dog during trial proceedings, a courtesy extended due to her medical condition and distinguished service record. "You have 15 minutes to get your affairs in order before transfer to detention," the MP sergeant informed her, his voice lowered. There was no animosity in his tone, just procedural precision. "Any personal effects will need to be cataloged, and most will be returned to your next of kin." Astrid nodded once, her gaze fixed on a point across the courtroom. For a brief moment, her eyes locked with Admiral Wexler's. Something passed between them, an unspoken communication that caused the Admiral to straighten slightly, his hand moving unconsciously toward his breast pocket. Lieutenant Quill gathered his materials, dejection evident in every movement. "Commander, I will begin the appeals process immediately. The sentence won't be carried out until all appeals are exhausted. That gives us time to—" "Lieutenant," Astrid interrupted quietly, "there is something you should know about loyalty." Her words seemed oddly disconnected from their situation, causing Quill to furrow his brow in confusion. Before he could respond, Captain Blackwood approached. "The United States Navy has demonstrated today that no one, regardless of rank or record, is above the law." His words were clearly meant for the journalists still present. Lieutenant Commander Colvere betrayed everything the uniform stands for. Astrid did not react to the provocation, her composure unshaken. This only seemed to irritate Blackwood further. "Do you have anything to say for yourself, Commander? Any explanation for why you betrayed your team?" For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Astrid's face, not shame or anger, but something that almost resembled pity. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the mission requires sacrifice." Blackwood scoffed, interpreting her words as a weak justification. "The only sacrifice was made by the good men who died because of your actions." Judge Ravencroft, who had been conferring with her clerk, looked up sharply. "That is enough, Captain. The court has rendered its verdict. There is no need for further commentary." As Blackwood withdrew, Admiral Wexler rose from his seat, preparing to leave. The case was concluded, his testimony having sealed Astrid's fate. As head of naval intelligence for the Pacific Fleet, his schedule was demanding, and this trial had already consumed too much of his time. "Admiral," Commodore Ravencroft acknowledged. "Thank you for your service to this court. Your testimony was instrumental in reaching a just verdict." Wexler nodded solemnly. "Justice has been served, Your Honor. The families of our fallen can perhaps find some closure, knowing the responsible party has been held accountable." His voice carried the perfect note of restrained emotion. A commander who had lost men under his ultimate authority. As Wexler moved toward the exit, Valor's attention shifted entirely. The dog's ears perked forward, his body tensing slightly, though he maintained his position. Astrid's fingers continued their subtle tapping against his harness. Lieutenant Okafor, still at the prosecution table, noticed the change in the dog's demeanor. Her gaze moved from Valor to Astrid to Wexler, a puzzle slowly assembling in her mind. The courtroom remained in disarray following the unprecedented sentence. Officers whispered among themselves, while journalists rushed to file their stories. The military police stood ready to escort Astrid to the detention facility, where she would await transfer to the military prison at Fort Leavenworth. "Valor," Astrid said quietly, her voice barely audible over the courtroom noise. The dog's ears twitched, awaiting the command that would follow. The MPs paid no attention, focused on their procedure for prisoner transfer. Admiral Wexler had almost reached the door, exchanging handshakes with several senior officers on his way out. His hand unconsciously patted his breast pocket, a gesture so subtle that only the most observant would notice. "Confirm," Astrid finished, her voice suddenly clear and commanding. The single command transformed the service dog. With military precision, Valor bolted across the courtroom toward Admiral Wexler. Several officers moved to intercept the dog, but Valor was too quick, weaving between startled personnel with unexpected agility. The gallery erupted in confusion as Valor leapt up toward the Admiral, who recoiled in surprise. In one fluid motion, Valor snatched something from inside Wexler's uniform, jacket pocket, dropping back to all fours and immediately turning to race back toward Astrid. "Restrain that animal!" Wexler shouted, his composed demeanor suddenly shattered. His hand clutched at his empty breast pocket, face contorting with an emotion that seemed far more intense than the situation warranted. The MPs guarding Astrid hesitated, caught between their duty to control the prisoner and the unexpected chaos unfolding. Valor slipped past them, returning to Astrid's side and dropping a small metallic object into her outstretched hand. The object resembled a military challenge coin, roughly the size of a $50, but with subtle differences that only a trained eye would notice. Its surface gleamed with an unusual finish under the courtroom lights. "That is property of naval intelligence." Wexler advanced toward Astrid, his voice raised to a near shout. Two MPs stepped between them, confused by the sudden confrontation but maintaining protocol. "This," Astrid held up the device, speaking loudly enough for the entire courtroom to hear, "is a micro-recorder designed by the Office of Naval Intelligence for deep cover operations." Her voice carried unexpected authority, silencing the confused murmurs around her. "And it contains every conversation Admiral Wexler has had in the past 30 days. Judge Ravencroft banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! What is the meaning of this disruption?" Lieutenant Quill looked as confused as everyone else. "Your Honor, I have no knowledge of what my client is referring to. This was not part of our defense strategy." "She is attempting to create a diversion," Wexler interjected, composure partially restored, though a faint sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead. "This is standard procedure for cornered operatives, creating chaos to enable escape. The device is merely a challenge coin." "Secure the Admiral," came a new voice from the back of the courtroom. Captain Lorelei Strauss entered through the rear doors, flanked by 4 armed agents in Naval Criminal Investigative Service windbreakers. "And preserve that recording device as evidence." The courtroom erupted in confusion as NCIS agents moved through the crowd toward Wexler. The Admiral's face darkened as he recognized Strauss. "This is outrageous," he protested, backing toward the exit. "I am the head of Naval Intelligence Pacific Fleet. I demand to speak with the Secretary of the Navy immediately." "Admiral Wexler," Strauss replied calmly as her agents surrounded him. "You are being detained pending investigation into espionage and treason against the United States. Please do not make this more difficult than it needs to be." Judge Ravencroft struck her gavel with enough force to silence the room. "Captain Strauss, explain yourself. This is an unprecedented interruption of court proceedings." Strauss approached the bench, credentials in hand. Your Honor, I apologize for the irregular procedure, but this court-martial has been part of a classified counterintelligence operation. She handed Ravencroft a sealed document bearing the insignia of the Chief of Naval Operations. These are orders directly from Admiral Harrison authorizing the operation and temporarily superseding standard JAG protocols. As Ravencroft reviewed the document with increasingly widened eyes, a technical specialist from the NCIS team approached Astrid. "Commander, may I have the recording device, please?" Astrid handed over the coin-like object. It should have captured everything from the past 4 weeks. He has been wearing it daily, believing it to be a secure communication device provided by his foreign handlers. The specialist nodded and connected the device to a secure tablet. After several moments of work, he nodded to Captain Strauss. "The recording is authentic and intact, ma'am. Multiple conversations present, including explicit discussions of espionage activities. Play entry 14-7, Astrid instructed. Timestamp should be approximately 2 days before the Yemen operation." The specialist looked to Strauss, who nodded her approval. He tapped the tablet several times, and suddenly Admiral Wexler's voice filled the courtroom, crisp and clear. "The SEAL team will be in position at 0200. I have modified their intelligence brief to place them directly in your operational zone. 3 kilometers east of the arranged coordinates, there is an abandoned structure that would provide excellent cover for your team. Confirmation of elimination will trigger the second payment of $2 million to the Cayman account." A heavily accented voice responded. "And the woman, this lieutenant commander, she suspects nothing?" Colville has been asking questions about inconsistencies in recent intelligence, too observant for her own good. "After this operation, I will ensure she takes the fall. Her medical status makes her the perfect scapegoat, bitter about her career ending, financially strained from treatments not covered by military insurance. The narrative writes itself." The recording ended, leaving the courtroom in stunned silence. Admiral Wexler, now in handcuffs, stared at Astrid with undisguised hatred. "That is a fabrication," he finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Commander Colville is clearly attempting to deflect from her own guilt." Astrid finally spoke, addressing the court rather than Wexler. 3 years ago, naval intelligence identified a pattern suggesting a high-level mole within Pacific Command, but could not pinpoint the source. When I began finding inconsistencies in mission intelligence after my injury, I reported through secure channels directly to NCIS. Captain Strauss continued the explanation. "Lieutenant Commander Colville volunteered to be the bait in our operation. We suspected the real traitor would attend her trial to ensure the conviction. The dog was specially trained to detect and retrieve this specific recording device once it was brought into proximity." "Your silence during the trial," Lieutenant Quill began, looking both relieved and bewildered. "Was necessary," Astrid finished. "If I had mounted any genuine defense, Wexler would have destroyed evidence and disappeared. My apparent guilt had to be convincing enough to make him feel secure." Judge Ravencroft looked from the documentation to Wexler, now surrounded by NCIS agents, to Astrid. The same officers who had looked at Astrid with contempt now stood in shocked silence as her true mission became clear. "This court," Ravencroft announced, "will stand in recess pending review of this new evidence. The sentence against Lieutenant Commander Colville is suspended immediately." She turned to Astrid. "Commander, you are released from custody, though I request you remain available for further proceedings as we unravel this situation." As NCIS led Wexler away, he locked eyes with Astrid one final time. The hatred in his gaze was matched only by the quiet resolve in hers. Valor returned to her side, sitting attentively as the officers and spectators processed what they had witnessed. Lieutenant Quill approached Astrid, his expression a mixture of awe and embarrassment. "Commander, I had no idea. They kept me in the dark about the entire operation." "That was intentional, Lieutenant," Astrid replied. "Your genuine belief in my guilt made the performance more convincing. You did exactly what was needed." Captain Strauss dismissed her agents with instructions to secure Wexler, then joined Astrid. "Well done, Commander. The operation played out exactly as planned, though I admit I had my doubts when you proposed using valor as the retrieval mechanism." "Standard procedures would have been expected," Astrid replied, scratching Valor behind the ears. "Wexler would have been prepared for human agents. He never considered a service dog might be more than it appeared." Captain Blackwood, the prosecutor, approached with visible discomfort. Commander Colville, he paused, struggling to find appropriate words. Had I known? You performed your duty admirably, Captain, Astrid interrupted. Your prosecution needed to be convincing. You were selected specifically for your thoroughness and reputation. The courtroom had largely emptied, most officers and spectators dismissed by the judge as she conferred with senior JAG officials about the unprecedented turn of events. Lieutenant Okafor, however, remained, approaching Astrid with newfound respect in her eyes. The signals you were giving Valor throughout the trial, she observed. That was a communication system. Astrid nodded. Modified tactical hand signals, adapted for our situation. Valor has been with me since my rehabilitation began. We had ample time to develop protocols. And your injury? Okafor asked hesitantly. Was that part of the operation too? A shadow crossed Astrid's face. No, the spinal damage was real, sustained during an extraction operation in Somalia. That part of my record is accurate, Captain Strauss interjected. The injury provided perfect cover for the operation. An embittered, disabled veteran with financial problems makes a plausible traitor. Admiral Wexler believed he had found the ideal scapegoat. Instead, Astrid added quietly, he revealed himself. The recording device was designed by NCIS Technical Division to resemble a secure communication tool. Our intelligence suggested his foreign handlers had provided him with similar technology. When we leaked information about a potential mole investigation, he requested a new device from his contacts, fearing his old one might be compromised. We intercepted the delivery, Strauss continued, and substituted our own version. He has been essentially recording himself for weeks, believing he was sending secure messages to his handlers. The remaining officers in the courtroom had gathered closer, listening to the explanation with rapt attention. The story would become legend in naval circles, an operation so classified that even the court itself had been unaware of its role. Judge Ravencroft returned, her formal demeanor softened somewhat by the circumstances. Commander Colville, I have spoken with the Judge Advocate General and the Chief of Naval Operations. Your record will be fully restored, with commendation for your service in this operation. She paused, genuine regret crossing her features. I regret that you had to endure what must have been an extremely difficult experience. The mission required it, Your Honor, Astrid replied simply. NCIS has requested you remain under their protection until the full extent of Admiral Wexler's network can be determined, Ravencroft continued. Captain Strauss will handle those arrangements. As the courtroom finally cleared, Astrid allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Valor leaned against her leg, a solid presence amid the chaos. The dog had performed flawlessly, completing the mission they had trained for over countless hours. Ready to go home, boy? She asked softly. Valor's tail wagged once in response. Mission complete, but loyalty unending. 6 months after Admiral Wexler's arrest and confession, the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado, California, had added a new program to its curriculum. Under the shade of eucalyptus trees, Lieutenant Commander Astrid Colville led a specialized course on counterintelligence operations and advanced canine training. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training yard as a group of handlers and their service dogs gathered for instruction. Astrid's wheelchair was positioned at the front, modified for the outdoor terrain with reinforced wheels and a more robust frame. Valor sat attentively beside her, the embodiment of canine discipline. The advantage of service animals in intelligence work, Astrid explained to the assembled group, is that enemies rarely consider them a threat. They see the disability, not the capability. She nodded to Valor, who immediately rose to demonstrate. Specialist Thornton will play our subject of interest today. He is carrying a recording device similar to the one used in Operation Lighthouse. Specialist Thornton, a broad-shouldered intelligence officer, stood casually among the other instructors, giving no indication of his role. Valor moved through the group, seemingly interested in receiving pets from various personnel. When he reached Thornton, his behavior changed subtly, almost imperceptibly to the untrained eye. Notice the ear position, Astrid pointed out. The slight change in tail carriage. These are indicators Valor has been trained to display when detecting specific electronic signatures. With a hand signal from Astrid, Valor suddenly sprang into action, leaping up and retrieving a small object from Thornton's breast pocket with surgical precision. He returned directly to Astrid, dropping the device into her outstretched hand. Execution time under 4 seconds, she noted, checking her stopwatch. In field conditions, most observers would register only a friendly dog jumping up for attention. The retrieval action is concealed within normal canine behavior patterns. The handlers watched with undisguised admiration. Most had been selected for this program based on their existing expertise with working dogs, but the level of precision in Valor's performance exceeded typical military canine protocols. The key is building on the natural bond, Astrid continued, rewarding Valor with a treat from her pocket. Your dogs already trust you implicitly. Our job is to refine that trust into operational capability. As the handlers dispersed to work with their animals, Captain Lorelei Strauss approached from the administration building. Her NCIS uniform had been exchanged for civilian attire, part of her new role heading the expanded counterintelligence division. Impressive demonstration, Strauss commented, watching the teams practice basic retrieval exercises. The program has received additional funding approval. Fleet Command was particularly impressed with the Yemen operation outcomes. Astrid nodded, adjusting her position slightly. The wheelchair was a constant reminder of the physical cost of service, though she never mentioned discomfort. How are the new trainees progressing? Ahead of schedule. Having you as lead instructor has been invaluable. Your first-hand experience brings credibility no training manual could provide. The subsequent investigation into Wexler's operation had revealed a network stretching back 7 years. He had compromised dozens of operations and was responsible for the deaths of 17 American service members. His trial was being conducted behind closed doors, the full extent of the damage classified at the highest levels. The Secretary of the Navy signed off on your Navy Cross this morning, Strauss said, handing Astrid a folder. The ceremony is next month. President wants to do it personally at the White House. House Astrid accepted the folder without opening it, her expression unreadable. The families of the team members who died in Yemen, full benefits restored, and the record shows they died in service to their country, not victims of a traitor's actions, Strauss confirmed. We have also arranged for personal letters from the president explaining the circumstances, insofar as security clearances allow. Strauss leaned against the railing overlooking the training yard. The Pacific Ocean glittered in the distance, a constant backdrop to the facility. You know, most people would not have volunteered for what you did. You risked everything, your reputation, your freedom. There were no guarantees we would catch him in time. Astrid watched the new handlers working with their dogs on the beach below. Some were making rapid progress, others struggling with the precision required. The mission was worth the risk, she replied simply. The medical report came in, Strauss said, her tone softening. The doctors confirmed the nerve damage is permanent? No chance of regenerative treatment? Yes. The stress of the operation accelerated the degradation. Astrid adjusted her position in the wheelchair, the movement practiced and efficient. But I have found a new purpose here. These handlers and their dogs will save lives. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Quill, who had requested transfer to NIS after the truth about the Yemen operation emerged. He approached with a young ensign who looked nervously excited to meet Astrid. Commander, Quill greeted her with newfound respect. This is Ensign Macari. She is joining the program and specifically requested to meet you. The ensign stood at attention, her posture perfect. It is an honor, ma'am. Your case, it changed how I view service. She hesitated, clearly weighing her next words. May I ask how you endured being wrongfully condemned? Knowing everyone thought the worst of you? Astrid considered the question, her hand automatically moving to scratch Valor behind the ears. The dog leaned into her touch, his loyalty unwavering through court-martials and vindication alike. I never stood alone, she finally replied, her voice steady. And sometimes, protecting what matters means being willing to sacrifice how others see you. The answer seemed to satisfy the ensign, who nodded thoughtfully before being led away for orientation. Astrid watched them go, remembering her own early days in the service, the idealism that had driven her to pursue the most elite training the military offered. Lieutenant Javed's widow contacted me, Astrid said, once they were alone again. She wanted to thank me for clearing his name, said her children can be proud of their father again. Strauss nodded solemnly. Small comfort, but important nonetheless. It is why we do this, Astrid replied. Not for recognition, but for those who cannot defend themselves. She glanced at her watch. The advanced training session begins in 20 minutes. I should prepare. As Strauss departed, Astrid guided her wheelchair toward the specialized training building where the afternoon session would be held. Valor moved alongside, his pace perfectly matched to hers. The facility had been modified to accommodate her disability. Ramps replacing stairs and doorways widened for wheelchair access. Inside, technical specialists had set up various electronic devices for detection training. The program had expanded beyond simple retrieval to include recognition of specific signals and frequencies, turning service dogs into sophisticated counter-surveillance tools. Lieutenant Commander Drayson, who headed the technical division, greeted Astrid as she entered. "We have implemented the modifications you suggested, Commander. The new training modules should help the dogs distinguish between similar electronic signatures." "Excellent," Astrid replied, examining the equipment. "Let us test Valor on the full spectrum first, establish a baseline for the others." As they worked, Admiral Harrison, Chief of Naval Operations, arrived unexpectedly. The room snapped to attention, but Harrison waved them back to their tasks. "At ease, this is not a formal inspection." He approached Astrid directly. "Commander Colvere, I wanted to personally review the program's progress. The implications for field intelligence are significant." "Sir," Astrid acknowledged, "we are seeing promising results across multiple canine teams. Valor can now identify and retrieve 17 distinct electronic signatures with 96% accuracy." Harrison watched as Valor demonstrated, correctly identifying a specific transmitter hidden among several similar devices. "Impressive. And the new handlers? 8 weeks training minimum before field readiness. Some teams are progressing faster." Harrison nodded, satisfied with the assessment. "Walk with me, Commander." Or rather, he smiled slightly, acknowledging her wheelchair. "I will walk with you." They moved to a quieter area of the facility, Valor following attentively. Once they were alone, Harrison's expression grew more serious. "The full extent of Wexler's betrayal continues to unfold. 23 operations compromised, 17 confirmed casualties, possibly more we have not yet identified." He shook his head grimly. "One of the worst intelligence breaches in naval history. Has he revealed his motives, sir?" "Money, primarily. Some ideological disillusionment after being passed over for promotion twice. The usual toxic combination of entitlement and resentment." Harrison studied Astrid's face. "Your willingness to be the scapegoat saved countless lives, Commander. The President has been fully briefed on your role." Astrid acknowledged this with a slight nod, uncomfortable with praise. "Any operation requiring such measures represents a failure of systems, sir. Our new protocols should prevent similar breaches." "Indeed." Harrison paused, considering his next words carefully. "There is something else. Naval Medical Research has expressed interest in your case. They believe your spinal injury might respond to an experimental treatment protocol they are developing." Astrid's expression remained neutral. "With respect, Admiral, I have explored most available options. The prognosis has been consistent. This is different. A new approach using regenerative nerve therapies, developed initially for combat trauma cases. Your injury profile matches their parameters." Harrison's tone softened slightly. "It would mean temporary reassignment to Walter Reed, possibly 6 months of treatment. No guarantees, but their preliminary results are promising." For a moment, Astrid said nothing, her hand resting on Valor's head. The possibility of walking again had long been relegated to the realm of unlikely dreams, something accepted and moved beyond. "The program here," she finally said. "It needs consistency during this development phase. Lieutenant Commander Drayson is fully qualified to continue your work temporarily," Harrison countered. "And frankly, Commander, you have earned the right to pursue this opportunity." Astrid looked out the window toward the training yard, where the new handler teams were working through their exercises. The program would continue with, or without her direct involvement, the systems and protocols she had developed already taking root. "I will consider it, Admiral." "Thank you." Harrison nodded, satisfied for now. "The official request will come through channels next week. Take time to think it through." He glanced down at Valor. "Would your partner here accompany you to treatment?" For the first time, Astrid smiled slightly. We are a package deal, sir. Where I go, he goes. Of course. Harrison prepared to leave, then turned back. One more thing, Commander. Regardless of your decision about the medical treatment, your next assignment has already been approved. Naval Intelligence Special Activities Division has requested you specifically to head their counterintelligence unit, wheelchair or not. After Harrison departed, Astrid remained by the window, contemplating the unexpected turn of events. 6 months ago, she had faced a death sentence, condemned as a traitor by the very institution she had served faithfully. Today, she was being offered both medical hope and professional advancement. "What do you think, boy?" she asked quietly. Valor leaned against her leg, his warm presence a constant in a world of variables. As the sun began to set, Astrid turned her wheelchair toward the training yard. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions. But tonight, she would watch the handlers and their dogs, the next generation of an unexpected legacy born from sacrifice and vindication. In the distance, naval ships moved across the horizon, defenders of an unseen line. Some battles made headlines, others remained in shadows. But in both arenas, courage often looked the same, the quiet resolve to do what was right, regardless of who would ever know. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story of loyalty and justice moved you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service.